Procurement is basically using the budget for the government and making the best practices for each services and goods that we purchase, making sure that we don't have favoritism and make sure we're transparent to all the things that we do. Because at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money. We have to be doing the best to make sure it's put to good use.
Welcome to An Entrepreneur's Vibes, the podcast that gives insight into the minds of visionary entrepreneurs and business leaders. Brought to you by The Right Direction, the leading professional and technical writing company based in North America. Each episode, we explore stories and experiences of those who dared to dream, took the leap, and built their own empires. Today, we're excited to bring you a special episode featuring one of the incredible individuals we connected with at the FAPPO conference. That's the Florida Association of Public Procurement Officials, where The Right Direction was proudly invited this year. Through this segment, we're shining a light on the world of government procurement, an often overlooked but incredibly essential part of governance, ethics, and public service. Whether you're a student considering a future in public service, a professional curious about procurement, or just someone who wants to learn about the systems that make our communities run, this episode is for you. Our guest today is a dedicated and passionate procurement coordinator for the City of Oviedo, Florida, with a background rooted in public service and a deep understanding of how procurement supports transparency, efficiency, and trust in local government. Our guest brings a fresh and insightful perspective to the conversation. In this episode, we'll explore their journey into the world of procurement, from his early education and career path to the technical and ethical complexities of the role he plays today. We'll also dive into the challenges and rewards of government procurement, the evolving landscape of public service, and what it truly takes to build a career rooted in purpose and impact. Welcome to the show, Abel Velasco.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Pretty good, excited to be here. This is my first time doing a podcast interview, so I appreciate you inviting me and being persistent on, giving me a call and all of that. So I really appreciate it.
We're so honored to have you. Could you tell us and our audience a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
I'm from Philippines originally. I moved here in Florida when I was 16 and just kind of moving around the world. I was in the military and lived in Japan for several years, and I'm back here in Florida. So that's just a little bit of my background.
That's really fascinating. So you've really traveled all around the world. And what was it that sparked your interest in public service or government work? Was it seeing how other systems all across the world was performing?
When I started my Navy career, I was logistics, and that kind of brought me to procurement. So just from aviation supply to purchasing there, when in my Navy career, when I finished my bachelor's in finance, I went into procurement. My original plan was to go in the finance field, but since I have more experience, I kind of just keep it going to public procurement now, doing local procurement.
And could you tell us where you went to school to get your finance degree? And can you tell us if there's any similarities between finance and the world of procurement?
Yes, so I went to Southern New Hampshire University. I did an online school. The difference between finance and procurement is they kind of overlap, completely different, but there's a lot of things that have similarities in them. We still take a look at budget and all of that for the city, but overall the process is different, I would say. So from procurement is we have steps on or best practices to follow when getting or procuring materials and goods. As finance is more on analytics and basically evaluating the budget or the overall finance or the entity.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of our audience would really relate because a lot of people, they take something in school or they take a certain degree, but that's not necessarily the career path that they eventually lead on. And can you tell us a little bit about how you landed your role as a procurement coordinator in Oviedo City?
So yeah, so after I graduated my finance degree, I actually going back to the transition from finance degree. It was just I had two resumes, and then I was just I was applying for finance and procurement because I have more experience in purchasing. And yeah, that's how I landed my role in Oviedo. I just started applying for both job description, and I have more response from procurement. So that's how I got into this position.
And did you have any mentors or experiences that you can say guided you in the direction of pursuing procurement as a career?
Mainly experiences. My mentor right now is my manager. So she's pushing me to, get my certification and all of that. And as for experience is yeah, from getting the finance degree and then just having experience from purchasing, logistics, all of that put together brought me to procurement.
And in case there are any students out there who want to try their hand in this career, could you share some of the
Mhm.
certifications that you had to go through?
So currently, I'm working on my certified public procurement. When you're starting out, you don't really need certification for this position, but it helps to work on your CPPB, CPP, or from NIGP. Those are the things that can be doable if they want to get into this field. Because a lot of public procurement, when we go to FAPPO or any other procurement position, usually look for those certification.
And because you were trained in finance, let's say, and you were
Mhm.
going into a completely different career path, even though you say there were overlaps, were there any initial skepticisms or doubts when you entered this field?
Not really, because on my Navy career, I just like the work, the variety of job duties that I have to do. If I'm procuring goods today, I'm procuring services tomorrow. It kind of makes the job, more enjoyable, and yeah, that's what I like about the current role.
I think that's why you're also like thriving in the role because you didn't meet it with any skepticism. And I guess maybe because you've already been in the Navy that really like hardened you for, stress and all that stuff. So I think
That's
you
right.
were thoroughly prepared. But for our listeners out
Yes.
there who aren't necessarily well read on procurement, could you please
Mhm.
tell us exactly what is procurement in the context of public service?
Yes, so procurement is basically using the budget for the government and making the best practices for each services and goods that we purchase. Make sure we're not just prioritizing or we're making sure that we don't have favoritism and make sure we're transparent to all the things that we do. Because at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money, and we have to be doing the best to make sure it's put to good use.
Wow. It does sound like a huge responsibility to be able to allocate like the budget correctly. So it
Mhm.
does sound like a big job. And what would you say are the types of or what type of procurement strategy or approach do you think tends to be the
Yes.
most effective in public service?
There's no specific one for each project is different. And no, you have subject matter experts. So usually they know the best of what they want because we have to think of long term when we procuring more expensive stuff, a
Mhm.
project that will last for years and years. We're not just like, no, this is cheap today. Oh, we're gonna get it. So there's no specific method for that applies to all. You have to like a RFP or RFQ. For those who doesn't know, request for proposal or request for quotation or qualifications. Those things have specific use or best practice to depending on a project or any requests.
That's really fascinating you brought that up because I also wanted to ask, like, what would you say is something that makes a vendor start out during the selection process? And what is it that makes
Mhm.
you think, okay, I think I can work with these vendors and for a long
Well,
time, like you said?
that's a good question. Basically, knowing your client, just like any other sales, knowing your client is best because what I've seen in the past is bigger companies tend to have streamlined their processes for bidding, but knowing your client can help because, that's how smaller vendor or vendors that's just starting out wins because they evaluated their client, knowing what they do, what they like, just some little things that makes you stand out in your proposals can make a difference on the people that evaluating you.
I see. And so, what would be your top piece of advice for companies submitting their RFPs?
For knowing the client, knowing the places and just do not be generic on your proposal, I would say. That would be my top piece of advice. If they are bidding on multiple projects or multiple cities, each one should be still allocated some time to get to know them because, just putting pictures for your proposal, of example, just any city or generic picture that you put on every RFP. Yes, it's okay. Sometimes they'll win, but the vendors that did their homework will stand out, and it's usually shown.
And on the flip side, what's the most common reason that you reject an RFP submission or a vendor proposal?
The most common will be just not reading the entirety of the requests.
Mm.
They'll miss because we have a lot of vendor submittals. They can get disqualified pretty quickly because they didn't read the whole thing. They didn't submit a specific form. Yeah, and it happens fairly often.
I see. I think these are really great advice. And I really wanted to get into like a day in the life of you as a procurement coordinator. So I wanted to ask like what are some of the operational challenges that you face during the procurement process and how do you currently address them?
I would say time management because we're a small city. We have two people in procurement only. We have the whole city for procuring stuff. Time management is the biggest challenge, but just knowing how to prioritize them and knowing make sure you plan out months and months ahead
Mhm.
or even years for, future project. That's the biggest challenge and make sure your priority.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do struggle with time management. Could you share some of the things you personally do to stay like in schedule
Mhm.
and to help with your personal
Right.
time management?
For me personally, if I could do it in a couple minutes, I would do it right away. And for a longer time frame, I tend to do those usually early in the morning when nobody's calling and nobody's yet in the office because once everybody starts getting busy, everybody's calling for what they need, and that's when you kind of break your flow for working and your allocated time for each task kind of breaks and it's not efficient to be stopping and then working on something else stopping. That's how I manage my day to day.
That sounds like a really great plan, like really great compartmentalization of doing the tasks that are
Mhm.
easier. I feel like I also kind of veer the same way. And you did share that you are a relatively smaller city. So does that mean you also
Mhm.
have a smaller office and less people to work with?
Yes. So I work in finance department and two of us is only procurement and that's how small we are.
It is a very small office. So, how do you ensure a smooth collaboration between the procurement department and other departments, like maybe legal or operations? Is it
Mhm.
easier because it's a smaller city, or is it a bit more challenging?
I think it's easier because you could basically talk to anybody. If you want to get things done pretty quickly, you could just walk into their office and work it right away. And yeah, with legal, it's not really much challenges. We have a good communication on top of everything. That's why it's easier, I believe, than working with a lot of people.
Hmm. What advice would you have for people out there maybe who are also similarly working in like smaller offices? Like how can they better their communication with their colleagues?
That's a good question. I'd say just keep it open, keep it small talk and make sure the relationship is good at all times, or try to at least. And it works out well because if you have something important to work with, then they'll be open to kind of breaking their test or whatever it is and help you out. It's really nice to have open communication and open doors and all of that.
That is very important, especially in a smaller office because, you really have to like lean on each other for like
Hmm.
all the smaller tasks, the bigger tasks. So it is important to cultivate a good relationship with your colleagues. And I wanted
That's
to
right.
go a little bit back about the vendors, and I wanted to ask if you
Hmm.
can share an example of a time when a vendor exceeded your expectations. What what did they do that stood out?
Basically, we have evaluators. We're procurement, but we don't make the decision. At the end of the day, for bigger projects, we have multiple evaluators, which are whatever the engineers, either police or fire department. And we pick from each department, for example, to be an evaluator. Usually what stand out to them is, like I mentioned before, is a vendor doing their homework, just taking the time to knowing specific names of the evaluator if they present in evaluation, because we have presentation after we shortlist vendors. And usually what stands out to them is the authenticity of the presentator, basically just knowing the names and previous projects, knowing, what the city plans in the future can help. You can see the news, whatever's talked on usually. Yeah, that can definitely help.
And currently, do you see any improvements or changes that need to be done or changes that you would recommend to make the procurement process more client friendly or transparent or maybe better for you in-house?
Well, the difference between public procurement and being in corporate, I think, is we take the time to changes things. We might not be up to the technology because it can cost a lot, and we plan the taxpayers' money years and years. So it's hard to keep on changing and staying up to speed with current technology. And we can't just say, oh, we need this AI, for example, that costs this much. But yeah, it's not common practice in working in local government.
That makes a lot of sense. And besides like doing their homework, when you are already working with vendors, is there anything you wish that they would do less or more, like maybe improve on their side?
Yes, so double checking first thing that required, because that can disqualify you. But presentation is a big thing. Not be fancy, but knowing your client, addressing their needs, just knowing a little bit can go a lot further than generic on all your proposal. It's not everything is the same,
Mhm.
basically. Don't treat it as such.
No one size templates, basically.
Exactly. Exactly. So if you can build it to from scratch, that can help a lot. Yeah.
And you were talking earlier about like technology, for example, and not being up to date. On the
Hmm.
vendor side, have you ever had an experience or were you ever like, do you ever notice an RFP submission was made with AI? Is that a practice you think is ethical? Do you have any qualms about it? Are you guys against it? I wanted to know your stance on that.
No, I have not seen that before, but it's more of a lot is generic, basically. Using it's like description when you say, you're working on a specific road and what you see basically is the same. Yes, we are aware that, it's going to be similar, but the generic use of pretty much everything is a big no-no.
But in the future, if you do ever come across an RFP that you think
Mhm.
might be made with the help of AI, do you think
Mhm.
that RFP would even have like a chance to win that bid? What do you think?
I believe so. We don't know where AI is going, I think, because there's variations and there's a lot more detail that they can process. When it's put to good use, I think somebody can definitely pull out a lot more data from their client, basically, and put that on a specific proposal. And yeah, I think they can definitely have an advantage if they use AI, but not the basic ones because yeah, those are the generic where it comes down to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for sharing that insight with us. And I just wanted to talk a little more about like the challenges. So, for you, what has been the most challenging procurement project or situation that you've faced so far?
I'm still kind of fairly new, so I'm still learning as I go. And I think the career is you learn first of your career because everything's changing. You know, laws change and our logistics change all the time. So challenges. So yeah, that's the biggest challenge is just to keeping, make sure you're up to date. Reading the changes in policy is the biggest thing for me for my day to day.
Have you ever had to handle conflicts of interest or vendor disputes or maybe compliance issues in the past?
Disputes, compliance issues, not so much. We have specific steps for dealing with disputes, and make sure we do a debrief, and we're open to debrief, which is, if a vendor didn't win a specific project, then we can meet with them and let them know that this is why you didn't win this, just so they can bid on our future projects because we don't want to just like say no and kind of stop the business from bidding for future projects. We want to have as much options as we can.
Wow, that
And,
actually sounds good. Yeah, that you and then you tell them like constructive criticism as well.
not really. We base it on facts
Mhm.
for our evaluators. So this is a like for example, this is our evaluator says this is what you're lacking, and we are transparent to that. This is what they didn't like, and I think it helps for for disputes and vendor challenges that we have. Just being transparent that oh this is why you didn't win. Maybe you can work on that. That will be up to them.
And would you say the procurement decisions, is it a decision that is usually made under pressure? Because from my understanding, these some of these projects do take a long time. So I'm assuming that you guys also have like processes, like you're able to make good decisions that are not under pressure. And if so, what do you think are the strategies you apply to make fair and ethical procurement decisions?
We do not have, it takes a long time, so it takes planning before we make certain decisions. But for immediate purposes, I think the only challenge for that is emergencies. If we have hurricane, for example,
Mhm.
we still have to make the best practice when we're um, dealing with hurricanes or emergency disaster and still fix the issue.
I wanted to go back to when you were talking about like technology and like some of the things that you wish you could apply, even though it's technically not that easy to make those changes, especially in
Mhm.
government, because there are already existing
Yes.
systems.
Mhm.
Would there be any types of tools or technologies that you wish you had to make procurement tasks easier? Perhaps there are some software or platforms that you think can be essential for procurement.
Yes, I believe so. There's always room for improvement and make sure processes are go smoothly as you can, but we cannot have specific favoritism. So, I can't just say a specific product.
Of
This
course.
is good for this. But yes, there's always room for improvement in procurement and especially local government.
Hmm. And how do you see procurement evolving in the next few years?
In the next few years, I would say dealing with a big thing is tariffs, I would say, and
Mm-hmm.
AI, of course. Those two things could change procurement, especially with the changing tariffs, fluctuating and all of that. It will change procurement from the fees that we pay and all of that.
And could you dive deep into that a little bit, how tariffs can change procurement? Because in my understanding as well, that would be more costly for the vendors, right?
Yes, definitely. It's possible that the contract can change, vendor cannot support, delivering. So I think that will be the biggest impact. But
Mhm.
I'm not sure. Nobody knows where it leads to.
And would you say that would affect more local vendors, or do you also work a lot with international vendors for some of your projects?
I would say both.
Mm,
I work more with local, but I think it's going to affect all of logistics
mm,
in general because we have manufacturers that are limited, and it all stemmed down from a few companies or manufacturer in general.
hmm. And do you see those changes happening now, or do you think you have is there a timeline you think of when it'll be a bigger problem than it is currently?
Yes, things are getting expensive.
Mm,
That's yeah, I definitely see it because we'll have estimate on a certain project, and it usually it's like we cannot afford it.
And I think you would also have like less vendors trying to bid for projects if it becomes too expensive for them, right? And that would be an issue for you guys, then like projects would like take longer time to complete.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure on the vendor side on
Mm.
how they operate, but yes, it could be a possibility that they would not bid, or they just eat up cost, or we take up the cost. It really depends on what we, yeah, on the project and yeah, materials.
Hmm. And I really just wanted to like understand better, like why is it like important to outsource some of these like projects? Is it because the city, because obviously a lot of other cities do it as well, like procurement happens all throughout.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
but how important is it to like outsource these projects instead of just like doing them locally, besides the obvious of probably not having like the manpower or the ability to do so?
Mhm. It's basically it comes down to cost effective. Outsourcing your road projects is better because you have construction worker, and at certain times you run out of funding, for example, hopefully not, but if that happens, you can't just fire people for those kind of opportunities or job. And yeah, that's why we outsource a lot of our services and goods, and also, just having a warehouse, I guess, basically, or space for the city.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for answering that. And earlier you
Mhm.
did say that procurement is more than just like the resource allocation of like the finances and other
Mhm.
resources. I wanted to ask, like, what role does sustainability or social responsibility play in public procurement today?
Let's see. Today, being sustainable is kind of finding the balance between what's available and how much you can spend, basically.
Yeah, because I mean, you
Yeah.
did say, and I didn't even know that was a possibility for for budget to be completely used, like you said. So I guess
Mhm.
that also plays a role in that, like being like responsible in how you handle the resources of
Mhm.
the city, for example.
Yes.
And I guess
Mhm.
also on the flip side, choosing vendors that uphold social responsibility and have
Yes,
sustainable
sir.
practices.
Yeah, that definitely is a factor. I know a lot of organizations use that sustainability and make sure they put extra points when awarding a
Mhm.
specific vendor for sustainability. So, yes.
And I wanted to ask, like, what was your experience like in FAPPO or other similar conferences? How much does it help you to connect and network with vendors and maybe other officials? Could you just tell us a little bit about the process in general?
So conferences, we have classes. The FAPPO, for example, is sponsored by a specific vendor. If they can present on a class, because as government workers, we will attend those class, and we'll be informed of a specific new product or new process that are improvement to our current one. So I think that helps with vendors. And during trade show also on those conferences, it helps to connect with vendor because they can speak to us directly what are they selling, and yeah, it makes a lot of difference just seeing the vendor that we use. And even the vendor that we use, for example, they'll brought up something that is new or something that's not new to us, and it will be an improvement to our day to day. So it definitely helps for vendor to come into trade shows, conferences. The pool of government workers kind of talk to each other, and we
Mhm.
say, "Oh, this product is good for us." It's a network that is really good to procurement in general.
Mhm. And that sounds like really actually like a fun experience. It was really fun for us. Like this year was our first time being invited. Yeah, I didn't know that you as government officials also talk amongst each other to share with each other
Yes.
like which vendors work for you. So that's a really great it is a
Yes,
really great
definitely.
way to network, like you said. You know what? I also wanted to ask, like, how do you monitor and evaluate vendor performance? So let's say you have awarded them and they won the bid. How do you
Okay.
ensure that they comply with the contract and they do deliver quality services?
Since we are decentralized in our procurement, we just speak with our departments, basically, if they're doing a good job or an outstanding job. And usually the other departments will let us know that, oh, this vendor is it's been good to us before, and because there's a highly likelihood of the project is being a repeat again in the future because we have a lot of those.
Now, I wanted to ask some advice for our listeners out there who might be considering a career and becoming a public official one
Mhm.
day. What advice would you give someone who wants to pursue a career in procurement or public service?
Get your certification. A lot of people, I would say, start as a buyer. Small purchases usually is the stepping stone for procurement. And when I speak with my colleagues at FAPPO, uh, a lot of them did not pick procurement in general. Basically, you don't end up in procurement. They say procurement kind of just happens, basically. It's not their original plan. And when they end up in procurement, a lot of them stay in this career field for 10 plus years, 20, I've heard 30. So yeah.
Well, it does sound like a very enriching career then if they've
Hmm.
stayed for that long. I feel like
Yes.
that's for public service anyway. It's a
Hmm.
very gratifying job, I would imagine, because you do work
Yes,
for like a broader,
definitely.
yeah, for you work for the people, I guess. So it's like a very gratifying job, I would imagine. You know what? I actually did want to ask. I assume that you give feedback to your vendors. Do they
That's
give
right.
you feedback as well, like on the flip side?
Not so much. We give a lot of feedback to them. We don't expect it to get feedback from them. A thank you and just the demeanor in general is good enough for us. Of course, you don't want to be mean, for example, but yeah, it's a different environment, I would say. It's a lot more when
That
dealing
sounds
with
good.
vendor. I don't have any problems, so yeah.
And going back to advice, what soft skills should
Mhm.
professionals in government procurement focus on developing?
Definitely communication, openness, I would say, because those soft skills, it's kind of hard to learn. If you're very, very analytic and you tend to focus on one thing, make sure, that's not because you will be dealing with different things throughout the day and switching back and forth. It's kind of, yeah. You deal both communication and analytical on your day to day. So kind of balance both.
Okay, like a good balance. That's
Yes.
noted. And what would you say has been the most fulfilling part of your procurement career? We did talk about how being a
Mhm.
public servant has been gratifying, but for you personally, what has been the most fulfilling?
I would say just delivering to customers, which is our departments, basically. Those are gratifying, making giving them what they need. It helps them. It helps their work. the city in general, the residents. Yeah, that's gratifying on its own. We see it, and the improvement is there. It makes the job a lot more enjoyable.
That sounds good. Could you share one lesson that you've learned so far in your early career that you think every new procurement professional should know?
Don't rush things, I say. My biggest mistake, I would say, just make sure double checking, triple checking everything because you're dealing with funds for the government. And taking your time is essential. It's not about how much you can work, it's how correctly you can do your test.
You know what? I just remembered since you did bring up funds again and, allocating that properly. Does pricing and value proposition carry a factor when you're making decisions for making procurement decisions? Does pricing have a weight? Obviously, like compared to like the quality and the reputation of the company or vendor that you're working with. Does pricing have like does that come into factor? Because you said also like
Yes.
sometimes like the budget runs out. So
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. So we have the specific solicitation, which we talked about earlier. Depending on what we get, pricing, if it's a utility that's going to be only used for a short term, yes, we value pricing. For a longer term, that we're going to use, for example, like a public infrastructure, of course, we have to be more detailed on those and, making sure we pick the right vendor for those kind of project. And it goes beyond price.
so quality for first and foremost, but for maybe for smaller projects, and especially when the budget is running out, maybe weigh in pricing.
Yes,
Okay.
so price, kind of both, you can have both, best of both worlds, but yeah, we try to. But yes,
Mhm.
definitely quality for the longer term.
And so, one last question before you go. What message would you like to leave with our listeners, especially those considering a future in procurement or public service?
It's a very enjoyable career. It's worthwhile. And I could see myself, doing this for 20 plus years. Message to them is just get your certification if you want to start out in this career or get your degree in supply or finance or business. Any of those can work. But essentially, many people start as a buyer.
Well, thank you so much, Abel, for taking the time to grace our
Thank
podcast
you.
and sharing your wisdom with our listeners. We really appreciate it. And of course, thank you to everyone who listened to us today. This has been your host, Patricia. And remember, for all
Appreciate
your
you.
professional, business, and technical writing needs, there's only one way to go, and it's with the right direction. See you guys soon. Bye.